When I was a young man and I was at university and I got into a sport called debating, along with a whole series of other poor people who couldn't play sport properly, and got into debating instead and enjoyed arguing for a bit of a recreation. I know, recreational arguing. There you go. That's how tragic my life was as an undergraduate. I met a whole series of people who were similarly tragic, who unfortunately have gone on to do great things in life, including former prime ministers and ministers of the Crown, members of Parliament, jurists, judges, law lecturers, you name it. Everybody who's gone on to do very, very well. I don't know what happened to my life, but they've gone on to do well. One of those folk that I came across was a junior law lecturer at Canterbury University at the time, who was regarded as one of the most entertaining and, frankly, mindful of debaters and speakers. Probably too entertaining, frankly, to be in debating. Should have been a stand-up comic, given some of his antics, and a very, very clever man, who was a law lecturer, and his name was David Round. And David, for a long time, has been one of, I would suggest to you, New Zealand's leading academic conservatives. And when I think of a long time, I'm thinking, God, back probably 30 years, when it was unfashionable, certainly in academic circles, to be a conservative. But David always was. And he's just written a recent article on the blog called Bassett, Brash and Hyde about a week ago, in which he is responding to an old constitutional law warhorse, as he describes him, Sir Geoffrey Palmer, who lurched out recently, God knows from what disability wing of which institution, I don't know, and had a crack at David Seymour for the Treaty Principles Bill. And David Round has answered that. And I thought it'd be a bit of fun to have him on the show, because he's not only got a good mind, but he certainly has a way with words. And he joins us now. David, it is a great pleasure to make your company again.
Well, likewise, Michael. Thank you very much. And look, honestly, I think you have probably done better than I have. Look, you're still alive and on the airwaves, and there are lots of people listening to you. Whereas I'm just sitting here by the fire reading this morning. Otherwise, I'll be out in the garden.
Oh, we see. No. It sounds. I don't know which of those two options I might take, actually, David. Listen, you've retired though as a law lecturer at Canterbury University. You were probably one of the very first, though, academics in university circles to say, the world's going to hell in a handbasket and it should stop. But you have particularly taken, I guess, a cocked hat at Geoffrey Palmer for his attack on David Seymour. Can I just ask you, in your view, and you practiced the law for many decades, taught it as well, is Geoffrey Palmer's legacy to this country, how would you describe it?
Well, I think we would have to describe it as mixed. I remember many years ago when a young law lecturer reading very seriously his thoughtful book about New Zealand's constitution and how it needed to be reformed. I thought, oh yes, all sorts of sensible things there. But he, with respect, he has always had a somewhat self-important side to him, and I think that was reflected even when he was teaching at Victoria, and then he became a politician and one of our least successful prime ministers. And goodness me, he's still around now, and I don't know how old he is. He must surely be getting near retirement age, but now he really is just becoming a Labour Party political hack. And I think this latest thing which he wrote some time ago, it's pure Labour Party stuff. He has not been, it's not any sort of serious, thoughtful academic study such as we expect from a thoughtful constitutional lawyer. He's behaving now as a politician rather than as an academic. But he has always been rather unrealistic. I mean, even his proposals for the reform of the New Zealand Parliament, they were the sort of high-minded things you'd expect from academics. There is one good thing I will say in him, which is that in 1987, the New Zealand Court of Appeal started off really the whole modern treaty business with its decision about the State-Owned Enterprises Act. Well, that was because of a clause that Geoffrey Palmer had specifically put into the Act about the principles of the treaty, and he assured the Cabinet that would make no difference at all to the Act. It was mere meaningless lip service, and that everything will be fine. And then Richard Prebble says this in a book he wrote about his time in the Cabinet. And then, lo and behold, the judges turned out to be political judges, making a political judgment, one of a lot that they have made on the treaty. And then we have been saddled with the whole treaty principles situation ever since. So he was, in a sense, he was right then, but nevertheless it was the judges who behaved wrongly then. But anyway, I'd say mixed with the greatest respect. Good ideas, but often unrealistic ones, and always tainted by his own political associations.
Yeah, well, the inclusion of that epic phrase, the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, has, I'd have to say, stuffed this country's future pretty well.
I'm afraid
obviously.
so.
Listen, you also make the point in that particular article, and I thought amongst the usual outstanding rhetoric that you employ, David, you said towards the end of your article, people are losing trust in our institutions because those institutions no longer deserve our trust. This morning we've been talking about Una Jagos, for example, and the prosecution guidelines, which would seem to be illustrative of what you're talking about.
I was just going to mention that, but yes.
Yes. Well, and that will continue to.
Disgraceful.
It is. But nevertheless, this concept that our institutions are not servicing our democracy, when did that cleavage start? Was it back in the 1980s when we perceived that institutions no longer belong to the people? They belong to the elites?
Yes. I don't think it would have happened before the 1980s. In fact, I'd be prepared to say that probably Sir Robert Muldoon, God bless him, whom you and I both remember from the old days,
yes.
Sometimes I think, well, perhaps he was the last Prime Minister who could really be said to be caring for ordinary New Zealanders for all his little ways. And since then, we've had people, all politicians, all political parties have been in the service of one ideology or another, probably the same ideology, but and then the pace is quickening, and now we just have blatant examples of governments which do not put the public welfare first, and that applies to what applies overseas, but it also applies to here in New Zealand, where COVID would be one example of that. That's I don't know what. I still don't know what to think about COVID. I did get my first couple of shots with some hesitation, and then have not any more since, and it seems to completely sort of swept me about. But the interesting thing about COVID is that when you and I were young, Michael, one of the big mantras, one of the big things that we all had to believe, because we were all young, keen, vaguely leftish people at that time. As John Key said, every New Zealander is just a little bit socialist. But one of the things that we knew was that among the big villains of our time, as well as multinational companies and big corporations and oil companies and Nestles and so on, but there were also big pharmaceutical companies, big pharma. They gouged prices, they falsified results, and all the rest, and then COVID comes along, and these villains, 5 minutes later, they produce a vaccine, and then we're all expected to think it's all wonderful. And if we don't, then there's something wrong with us, and we're conspiracy theorists. That's a bit of a digression. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gone.
No, I mean, I take your point. But
then our own government locks us up and really forces us to be vaccinated. And we think, well, whose side are they on, really? And then they conceal the hey poor results from us. And then, look, as surely the last year or so has shown that although there has the new government reflected a definite stiffening of the public mood about treaty issues, yet nevertheless the bureaucrats and the public service, they've got a mind of their own, and they continue to do these things. Including the prosecution guidelines, which you've seen this morning, and there is, in all the ruling elite in New Zealand and the West, there's this sense that they know better than the ordinary old stupid common person, and they are entitled to do what they like. They're in charge, and if we don't like it, that's just too bad for us, because our duty as citizens now is simply to do as we're told. And everyone's behaving in that very arrogant way. The judges, for example, have become political activists, I regret to say, in all sorts of ways. Our universities are full of people who wag their fingers and tell us what to do, and teachers and journalists, apart from a few brave ones, that the mainstream media are wrecked. Look, our whole world is just falling to pieces, and everything costs more, and we get less and less by way of service for it. We pay more in taxes and rates and fees to everyone, and what do we get? Less and less to show for it.